The story of Amira begins with a single look that changed her life. She was used to being invisible, the kind of woman others overlooked at restaurants, in offices, even in her own family's eyes. But one night, in the glittering lobby of a Dubai hotel, a man in a tailored white kandura noticed her. His name was Malik Al-Farid, a trillionaire businessman known for his oil empire, his impossible discipline, and a reputation colder than the desert night. When he offered her his hand, no one, not even Amira, believed it was real. They said he was only being kind. They said it would never last. Yet 3 months later, the world watched in shock as Amira, the woman everyone mocked for her size and simplicity, stood beside one of the most powerful men in the Middle East, her smile trembling with disbelief, her heart beating faster than the camera flashes surrounding her. But what happened after the wedding was nothing like a fairy tale. Because on their honeymoon, high in the sands of the empty quarter, where the dunes glow like fire at sunset, Malik did something no one expected. Something that would test her soul, her strength, and everything she believed about love. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, because this story will challenge what you think you know about beauty, power, and the true meaning of love. This is not just about a woman who married a trillionaire. This is about the moment he looked at her and said the one thing that would change everything. Amira had never seen a place so beautiful. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, its dunes glowing gold under the morning sun. The air shimmered like glass, and the wind carried the soft scent of jasmine and sand. She stood on the balcony of the private villa Malik had rented for their honeymoon, her heart pounding with both awe and disbelief. It had been only 5 days since their wedding, 5 days since the world had called her the luckiest woman alive. And yet, Amira didn't feel lucky. Not really. She looked down at her reflection in the glass door. The white silk robe Malik had given her hugged her body, soft but unfamiliar. Her curves were generous, her face round, her eyes full of emotion she couldn't name. She remembered how people had whispered at the wedding, about her weight, about how a man like him could ever love a woman like her. Maybe they're right, she thought. Maybe this isn't real. Behind her, she heard the soft click of the door. Malik stepped onto the balcony, his presence commanding even in silence. The morning sun touched his bronze skin, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw and the calm authority in his dark eyes. He was tall, impossibly handsome, and dressed casually, a white linen shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms marked by the faint scars of a man who had built his own empire. "Good morning, Amira," he said, his deep voice low and controlled. She turned quickly, forcing a smile. "Good morning." He studied her for a moment before walking to the edge of the balcony. "Do you know what I see when I look out there?" he asked, pointing toward the horizon. Amira followed his gaze, squinting at the endless sea of dunes. "Sand?" she guessed with a nervous laugh. Malik smiled faintly. "Possibility." She tilted her head, unsure. "Possibility?" "Yes," he said. "Every grain of sand is a story. The desert is not empty, Amira. It remembers every footprint, every secret. Just like people." Amira felt a chill she couldn't explain. There was always something about Malik's words, poetic but distant, like he was speaking to her and to someone else at the same time. He turned to her, his eyes darkening. "I've made many mistakes, Amira. You must know that before we go any further." Her smile faltered. "Mistakes?" He nodded. "I built an empire from nothing. But I lost something in return: trust. Connection. The ability to see people as more than assets." She stayed silent, unsure where this was going. Malik took a slow step toward her. "You're not like the others. You don't see me as a number on a screen or a headline in the news. When I look at you, I see truth." Amira's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with admiration. Not with sincerity. But before she could respond, he added softly, "And that's exactly why I brought you here." The words sent a strange current through her. "Why he brought me here?" "Malik," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "what do you mean?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "There's something I need to tell you. But I need to be sure you're ready to hear it." She tried to read his expression, but it was impossible. Malik was a man who could hide an empire behind a single calm stare. "Tell me," she said finally. "Whatever it is, I want to know." He studied her face, the honesty in her eyes, the vulnerability she didn't try to hide. Then he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was soft but carried the weight of meaning. "When I married you," he began, "it wasn't just out of love. It was also out of necessity." The words hit her like a slap. "Necessity?" He exhaled. "My family. The board. The investors. They needed to see that I was capable of something human, something emotional. They said a man without a wife cannot run a legacy. They don't understand love. They understand image." Her chest tightened. "So, I was part of that image?" Malik hesitated. At first. Amira turned away, her eyes burning. She had known, deep down, that something about their whirlwind romance didn't make sense. The sudden interest, the lavish proposal, the way he seemed to admire her more in public than in private. But hearing it aloud was like watching her heart crack open. "You used me," she whispered. He stepped forward quickly, his voice desperate for the first time. "No. I needed you. There's a difference." She spun around, tears welling up. "That's not better, Malik." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the mask of control fell. She saw the man behind the empire, exhausted, broken, human. "You were supposed to be a symbol," he said softly. "But somewhere along the way, you became more than that. I didn't expect to feel this alive again." Amira stared at him, unsure whether to believe him or hate him. Her heart told her one thing, her pride, another. The silence between them stretched until the desert wind filled it. Malik finally turned toward the horizon again. "I brought you here because I needed to see if what I feel for you is real," he said quietly. "Away from the cameras. Away from the noise." Her tears fell silently. "And if it isn't?" He turned back to her, his gaze steady. "Then I'll let you go. But if it is, then I will never let you walk away again." Amira's lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but her throat closed. Malik reached for her hand, hesitated, and then let it drop. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll show you what I mean." Then he walked back inside, leaving her alone on the balcony with nothing but the rising heat and the heavy truth that their marriage, their love, might not have been built on truth at all. But as the wind picked up, carrying the sound of his footsteps fading inside the villa, Amira whispered to herself, "Then tomorrow, I'll find out who you really are, Malik Al-Farid." And for the first time since the wedding, she wasn't afraid anymore. That night, Amira barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, Malik's words echoed inside her mind like whispers in the wind. At first, the room was dark except for the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the tall glass doors. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, peaceful yet suffocating. Inside, the villa felt like a cage lined with silk and gold. She turned to the other side of the massive bed. It was empty. Malik hadn't returned since he walked out earlier. The silence felt heavier than any argument could. When dawn came, Amira finally got up. She slipped on a flowing linen dress and walked barefoot into the courtyard. The air was cool, almost tender. The first rays of sun spilled over the dunes like liquid fire. And there he was. Malik sat by the fountain, dressed simply in a white shirt and beige pants, sipping dark Arabic coffee from a silver cup. His expression was calm, unreadable, the same quiet composure that made him feared in business and impossible to understand as a husband. He turned his head as she approached. "You didn't sleep," he said softly. "Neither did you," she replied. A faint smile crossed his lips. "Perhaps that means we're both still alive." Amira ignored the attempt at charm. She folded her arms. "You said you'd show me what you meant. I'm here." Malik studied her for a moment, as if trying to measure how much truth she could take. "I will. But first, eat something. We'll need our strength." "I don't have an appetite," she said. He looked at her plate, untouched fruit, warm bread. "You never do when you're upset." Her eyebrows furrowed. "You've noticed that?" He nodded slowly. "I notice everything about you, Amira. You think I don't, but I do." The way you tuck your hair behind your ear when you're nervous. The way you fake a smile when you're hurt. You think I don't see, but I do. His voice was quiet, sincere. And that sincerity cut her deeper than any lie could. Then you saw what you were doing to me, she said bitterly. Malik exhaled. Yes. He stood and set his cup down. There's something I need to show you. He led her outside, where a pair of horses waited near the dunes. Their coats shimmered under the sunlight, one black, one golden brown. Amira hesitated. I haven't ridden since I was a child. I know, he said. You told me once. You said it made you feel free. She blinked. She had said that, weeks ago, during one of their first late-night talks, when they'd shared stories about childhood dreams and small joys. She hadn't realized he remembered. Come, Malik said gently. Trust me. Reluctantly, she mounted the golden horse. Malik climbed onto the black one and guided them toward the open desert. The wind brushed against her face, warm and alive. The rhythmic motion of the horse beneath her began to loosen the weight in her chest. For a moment, she almost forgot why they were there. They rode in silence until the villa disappeared behind them, replaced by miles of untouched sand. Finally, Malik slowed his horse and stopped near a ridge overlooking the valley. Below them, tents and small shelters dotted the desert, a village Amira hadn't noticed before. What is this place? She asked. He dismounted and offered his hand. My father's legacy, he said. Amira followed him down the slope. As they approached, children ran past laughing, and women carried baskets filled with water. It wasn't a city, it was a community. Simple, alive, thriving amid the dunes. Malik greeted an elderly man at the edge of the camp. The man bowed and clasped his hand with reverence. Welcome back, Malik. Thank you, old friend, Malik said. Then he turned to Amira. This is where I grew up. Before the wealth, before the skyscrapers, before I forgot what mattered. Amira looked around, surprised. The people seemed genuinely happy to see him. There was no fear, no pretense. Just warmth. A little girl approached, holding a small clay figure. She handed it to Malik with a grin. I made this for you. Malik knelt, smiling. It's beautiful. Thank you, Lena. He turned to Amira. This is what I wanted to show you, the truth of who I was. She frowned. I don't understand. He pointed toward a well in the center of the camp. My father built this. Before the fortune, he was just a farmer. He believed in giving more than taking. When I took over the company, I forgot that. I became what he warned me about, a man who measured worth in numbers. And me? She asked quietly. Where do I fit into that? He met her gaze. You reminded me what it means to see people again. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to tell him it was too late. But seeing the way he spoke to the villagers, how he laughed freely, how his posture softened, she couldn't. You could have just told me this, she said. You didn't have to break me first. He looked at her sadly. Maybe I needed to see if you'd still stand beside me once you knew the truth. Amira turned away, her eyes stinging. And if I hadn't? Then I would have let you go, he said simply. Because love without honesty isn't love. She stood there in silence, watching the children chase each other through the sand. The simplicity of it all felt like a balm on her heart. Finally, Malik stepped closer, his voice softer now. There's something else I haven't told you. She faced him slowly. Another secret? He nodded. Before we married, I wrote a clause into my will. Half of my estate, the charities, the companies, everything, would transfer to my wife if I ever lost control of the Alfarid Empire. My board fought it, but I insisted. Amira froze. Half your empire? Yes, he said. And tomorrow, that clause will activate. Because I'm giving it all up. Her breath caught. What are you saying? He looked out at the horizon, where the sun had begun its descent. I'm leaving the empire, Amira. I'm walking away. The world will think I've gone mad. But I can't lead with greed anymore. I need to live with purpose again, with someone who reminds me what that means. The words hit her harder than she expected. Someone like me? She whispered. He turned to her, his gaze unwavering. No, he said softly. Someone exactly like you. The wind picked up between them, warm and alive, carrying the unspoken truth that their story wasn't about beauty or power anymore. It was about redemption. But neither of them knew that by the next sunrise, everything they thought they'd escaped would come back for them, and test that truth in ways neither was prepared for. That night, Amira couldn't stop thinking about what Malik had said, "I'm leaving the empire." The words replayed in her head like an echo she couldn't silence. It sounded impossible, a trillionaire walking away from everything most people could only dream of. Power, money, legacy, all of it. For what? For her? She didn't believe it. Not yet. They had returned from the village at sunset, both quiet during the drive. The air between them was heavy, full of emotions neither dared to name. Malik had been lost in thought, staring out the window as the dunes turned crimson under the fading light. And now, hours later, Amira sat alone on the edge of their bed, staring at the diamond-studded bracelet he'd given her the night of the wedding. It sparkled in the lamplight, a perfect, cold reminder of the world he came from. The world I'll never belong to, she thought. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Malik entered, no longer wearing his pristine white shirt but a simple black t-shirt, his sleeves rolled up. He looked different, less like a billionaire, more like a man. "You haven't changed," he said softly, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not tired," she replied without turning. He studied her for a long moment. "You're thinking about what I said?" "I'm trying to understand it," she said, her voice trembling. "You're talking about giving up everything. People don't just walk away from power, Malik." He walked toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. "And yet power walks away from people every day," he said quietly. "I've seen it happen, men with everything losing themselves until there's nothing left but the shell of who they were." Amira turned to face him. "And what will you be if you walk away?" His eyes softened. "Human." She wanted to believe him. But part of her feared this was just another chapter in his performance. Another story the world's richest man would tell himself to feel moral again. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'm announcing it publicly." Her head snapped up. "What?" He nodded. "I called an emergency press conference in Dubai. It's time to let them know." "Malik?" She stood, her voice urgent. "You can't just. Do you have any idea what they'll say? What they'll do? Your board, your investors, your family." "They've already said worse," he interrupted. "When I married you, Amira, I lost half of them. They said I was blinded by emotion, that I'd lost control. Maybe they were right. But for the first time in my life, I wanted to lose control." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne, cedar and something darker. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. He looked at her with an honesty she hadn't seen before. "Because I've built empires on fear, and it's killing me from the inside. I want to build something with love this time." She stared at him, speechless. The way he said love made her heart skip, not because she believed it fully, but because she wanted to. He reached out, brushing his fingers against her cheek. "I know what they call you, Amira. I've heard it. The whispers, the cruelty, the pity. But when I look at you, I see the one person who doesn't need anything from me." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Malik." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow, they'll see the truth, that strength isn't about what you own, but who you become when everything is taken from you." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world outside the villa seemed to fade. No cameras, no money, no power. Just two souls standing on the edge of something unknown. Then, Malik stepped back. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be a storm." She watched him leave the room, her heart aching with confusion and hope tangled together. The next morning, the storm arrived. By the time Malik's convoy reached Dubai, reporters were already waiting outside the headquarters of Al Farid Holdings. The media had caught wind of something, though no one knew exactly what. Amira stayed beside Malik in the car, her hands clenched on her lap. The city glimmered around them, glass towers reflecting the desert sun, luxury cars gliding through the streets like silver arrows. It was his kingdom, and he was about to walk away from it. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. "No," she admitted. Are you? He smiled faintly. Never. They stepped out of the car into a blinding wall of camera flashes. Reporters shouted his name, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Malik didn't flinch. He moved through the chaos with the calm of a man who had already made peace with his choice. Amira followed closely behind, shielding her eyes. Inside the marble lobby, his executives stood waiting, their expressions tense, suspicious. Mr. Al-Farid, said Yusuf, his chief financial officer, his voice tight. The media has been told there's a major announcement. Are you sure you want to do this without legal counsel present? Yes, Malik said simply. They'll understand soon enough. He walked into the main conference room, where a sea of cameras pointed toward a long table draped in white linen. The moment he sat, the murmuring ceased. He spoke slowly, clearly, his voice echoing through the room. For years, Al-Farid Holdings has stood as a symbol of strength, innovation, and wealth. But today I stand before you not as a leader, not as a symbol, but as a man who forgot what truly matters. The reporters leaned in. Amira's heart pounded. Malik continued, his tone steady. I am stepping down as CEO effective immediately. All assets under my control will be redirected to a new foundation, one dedicated to rebuilding communities across the Middle East. Poverty, education, hunger, these will be my new partners. Gasps filled the room. Questions erupted all at once. Mr. Al-Farid, are you serious? What about your shareholders? Are you ill? Malik raised a hand. The room fell silent again. This is not a crisis, he said. It's a rebirth. And I'm not doing it alone. He turned toward Amira. Every camera followed. This woman, he said, has reminded me that worth is not in perfection, but in purpose. That love can heal what greed destroys. I owe her my life and the man I am today. The crowd erupted. Some applauded. Others shouted questions. But Amira couldn't move. Her chest tightened, her eyes burning. Malik had just put everything, on the line for her. As security escorted them out through the flashing chaos, she whispered, Malik, what have you done? He looked at her, calm and certain. What I should have done the moment I met you. But behind them, unseen amid the commotion, Yusuf made a call on his phone, his face grim. Prepare the documents, he said. If Malik's really giving up control, we'll take what's left before he changes his mind. The empire wasn't ready to let him go. And neither was the past. The days that followed Malik's announcement felt like a storm that refused to die. News channels around the world replayed his speech on an endless loop. The headlines were everywhere. Trillionaire Arab steps down, world in shock, Al-Farid fortune in jeopardy. Who is the woman behind his decision? That last one hurt Amira the most. They showed her picture again and again. Photos from the wedding, close-ups from the press conference, and the comments poured in like acid. She trapped him. She's not even his type. This woman ruined him. Every insult felt like a new scar. She stayed mostly inside their Dubai penthouse, curtains drawn, avoiding her phone. Malik, however, spent his days meeting with lawyers, investors, and journalists, trying to finalize the transition of his empire. The man who once ruled the business world like a king now walked its halls as an exile, proud but exhausted. That night, when he returned home, she found him standing by the window, staring at the glittering skyline. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up, his posture heavy with fatigue. You didn't eat again, he said quietly without turning around. I'm not hungry, she whispered. He finally faced her, his eyes shadowed but soft. They're saying horrible things about you, aren't they? She gave a bitter laugh. They're saying horrible things about both of us. But I think they hate me more. Malik crossed the room and took her hand gently. Let them talk. They only see what they want to see. Wealth, scandal, betrayal. They don't see the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. And what is the truth, Malik? He hesitated as if weighing every word. That I was a fool for thinking I could change my life without hurting anyone. That I thought love alone could silence the noise. She pulled her hand away. Love? She repeated softly. Is that what this is? He looked at her, wounded by her tone. You doubt it? Amira turned toward the window, unable to face him. I doubt everything now. You've built your whole life on power and control. And now you say you've changed, but the world doesn't believe it. Maybe neither do I. Malik's chest tightened. He had been called ruthless, arrogant, even cruel, but never powerless. Yet in that moment, standing before the woman he had given everything up for, he felt utterly defeated. He stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly. Then let me show you. Not with words, but with what comes next. She glanced over her shoulder. What do you mean? I'm leaving Dubai tomorrow, he said. There's a village near the border where my father used to send aid before he died. It's suffering now, no water, no food, no funding since the investors froze my accounts. I'm going there myself. Amira blinked in disbelief. You're going to a desert village in the middle of a financial war? Yes, he said. Because if I don't go, no one will. And because I need to prove that walking away from power wasn't a mistake. She stared at him, torn between fear and admiration. Then I'm coming with you. Malik froze. No, Amira. It's dangerous. You've already been through enough. She shook her head. You said I reminded you of what it means to be human. Then let me be part of what you're trying to do. Don't shut me out again. Their eyes met, hers fierce and determined, his conflicted and full of awe. Then, slowly he nodded. All right, but once we're there, you do as I say. No arguments. Amira smiled faintly. That sounds exactly like something the old Malik would say. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. Maybe some parts of me will never change. The next morning, they boarded a small private jet and flew over endless stretches of golden desert. The sun was merciless, painting the sky in shades of fire. Hours later, they landed on a remote strip of sand where 2 jeeps waited, guarded by local volunteers. The journey that followed was grueling. The roads were little more than trails of dust and rock. The wind carried heat so fierce it burned their faces. But Malik never complained. He drove with steady focus, his hands gripping the wheel, eyes locked on the horizon. Amira sat beside him, watching in silence. There was something different about him now, less polished, more raw. His white shirt was soaked with sweat, his neatly trimmed beard dusted with sand. For the first time, he looked like a man stripped of wealth and armor. Hours later, they reached the village. What they saw broke her heart. The small settlement was half buried in sand. Children wandered barefoot near cracked wells. Women carried empty pots, their faces lined with exhaustion. A man approached, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Sheikh Malik. Malik stepped out of the jeep, offering his hand. Not Sheikh anymore. Just Malik. The man's eyes filled with tears. You came back. I said I would, Malik replied simply. Amira watched as the villagers gathered around him, men, women, children, their faces lighting up with hope. Malik spoke to them in Arabic, his tone humble yet commanding. She didn't understand every word, but she understood his heart. He wasn't their ruler anymore. He was one of them. For the rest of the day, Malik worked beside the villagers, helping to repair the well, distributing supplies he'd brought from the city. Amira joined him, handing out bottled water, bandages, and blankets. It was exhausting, but she had never felt more alive. As the sun began to set, she found Malik sitting by the well, his hands covered in dirt, his face illuminated by the golden light. She approached quietly, sitting beside him. You were right, she said softly. They don't need a CEO. They need you. He smiled faintly. No, Amira. They need hope. I'm just a man trying to give it back. She studied him for a long moment. You've changed. He turned to her, his expression calm. No. I've just stopped pretending. The desert wind swept through the camp, carrying laughter and the smell of firewood. The villagers were singing, their voices echoing under the stars. Amira felt something stir in her chest, something like peace. She reached for Malik's hand. He didn't resist. For a while, they sat together in silence, watching the flames dance. But then, a voice called out from the distance, frantic, panicked. Malik! The trucks, they're gone. He stood immediately. What do you mean gone? The men who brought them, they left. They took the remaining supplies. Malik's eyes darkened. Yusuf, he muttered. Amira's heart skipped. Your CFO? He nodded grimly. He must have followed us. He's not going to let me walk away from my fortune that easily. The fire crackled behind them as Malik looked toward the horizon, his jaw set with determination. For the first time, Amira saw not the billionaire or the hero, but the fighter he used to be. And she realized, with a chill running down her spine, that their battle had only just begun. The night wind howled across the desert, filling the air with a low, mournful hum. The villagers had retreated into their tents, their voices hushed, their hope dimmed. The supplies were gone. The trucks had vanished into the dunes, taking food, medicine, and the last bit of security Malik had promised them. Amira sat near the flickering fire, her arms wrapped around herself. Malik stood a few feet away, pacing. His white shirt, now brown with dust, clung to his body, and his face was tight with restrained fury. The orange glow of the fire painted shadows across his features, sharp, tense, and full of determination. Finally, he stopped pacing. Yusuf planned this, he said through gritted teeth. He must have bribed the drivers to leave once we were isolated. He's trying to prove I can't survive without him, that I'm nothing without my money. Amira looked up at him, her voice trembling. What will you do? He met her gaze, his dark eyes burning. What I should have done a long time ago. I'm going to stop hiding. She rose slowly. Malik, this isn't the city. You can't just call your lawyers or threaten him with a contract. You're in the middle of the desert. He turned toward the horizon where the faint red glow of distant taillights disappeared into the night. I don't need lawyers. I know Yusuf. He won't go far, he'll wait until I crawl back. But I won't give him that satisfaction. Before she could reply, Malik walked toward the jeep. Get some rest, Amira. I'll handle this. Handle it how? She asked, stepping in front of him. You're angry. That's exactly what he wants, to make you reckless. He paused, his expression softening. I can't stand by while my people suffer. You saw those children today. Her eyes filled with tears. And if something happens to you? He hesitated. Then, with quiet conviction, he said, then at least I'll fail for the right reasons. Without another word, he climbed into the jeep and started the engine. The sound roared through the stillness. Amira stood helplessly as the headlights cut through the night, the vehicle disappearing into the vast, endless sand. Hours passed. Amira couldn't sleep. The villagers had gone quiet, and the only sounds were the rustling of the desert wind and the crackle of dying flames. She stared at the horizon until her eyes blurred, praying Malik would return. And then she heard it, the faint rumble of an engine. The jeep reappeared, headlights flickering, dust rising behind it like a storm. Relief flooded through her, until she saw the way Malik stumbled out when it stopped. His face was streaked with sweat and blood. Malik, she cried, rushing to him. I'm fine, he said, brushing her off. But his arm was bleeding from a cut near his shoulder. What happened? He sighed, leaning against the jeep. Yusuf's men. They were waiting by the main road. They took everything, even the satellite phone. I tried to reason with them, but they're not here for logic. They're here for money. Amira's heart sank. We're cut off. For now. She reached for his arm to clean the wound, but he winced and stepped back. It's nothing. It's not nothing, she said firmly. Sit down. He frowned, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed him. He sank onto a crate, and she tore part of her scarf to wrap the wound. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked. Why are you always so stubborn? She whispered. Malik gave a faint smile. It's how I got this far. Maybe it's also what's breaking you, she replied softly. For a moment, their eyes met. The firelight reflected in his pupils, a glimmer of vulnerability she had never seen before. He looked away. When I was a child, he began quietly, my father told me that wealth is a test, not a blessing. He said, when you have everything, the real challenge is remembering who you are. Amira paused, her hand still. Did you remember? He exhaled. I thought I did. But somewhere along the way I started believing I was untouchable. That people loved me because I was powerful. That I could buy forgiveness. Her throat tightened. And now? He looked up at her. Now I know what it feels like to be powerless. And strangely it feels honest. The words hung between them like smoke. Amira sat beside him, her voice barely a whisper. You're not powerless, Malik. You came here. You tried. That's more than most would ever do. He turned to her, his gaze softening. You give me too much credit. And you give yourself none, she said, meeting his eyes. That's your problem. Malik's lips curved into the faintest smile. You talk like my father used to. Then maybe you should have listened to him more, she said playfully. For the first time in days, he laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that melted the heaviness between them. But just as the warmth returned, a loud crack echoed in the distance. Amira froze. What was that? Malik stood immediately, eyes scanning the darkness. Stay here. Malik. He held up a hand, silencing her. The villagers stirred, whispering among themselves. The noise came again, louder this time. Not thunder. Engines. 2 trucks emerged from the shadows, headlights blinding, rolling toward the camp. Malik's expression hardened. It's them. The jeeps screeched to a halt. Several men jumped out, dressed in black desert gear. One of them, tall, with a smug grin, stepped forward. It was Yusuf. Well, he said, clapping slowly. The great Malik Al-Farid, reduced to a hero in the sand. Malik's jaw tightened. You've stolen from people who have nothing. Return what you took. Yusuf laughed. You think you still give orders? You walked away, remember? You're not the king anymore. You're just a man who fell for a pretty story. Malik took a step forward. You're mistaken. I didn't fall, I chose to stand for something real. The 2 men faced each other, tension sharp as the desert wind. Yusuf's smile faded. You could have had everything, Malik. But you gave it away, for her. He pointed at Amira, who stood frozen near the fire. Tell me, does she even know who you really are? Or the things you've done to stay on top? Amira's eyes flicked to Malik, confusion in her gaze. What is he talking about? Malik didn't answer. His silence spoke louder than words. Yusuf smirked. So she doesn't know. Maybe she should. He leaned closer. Ask him, Amira. Ask your noble husband what happened to the workers who protested in his factories 3 years ago. Ask how many lives were ruined to keep his empire clean. Amira's heart pounded. Malik. Malik's voice was low, broken. It's true. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows across his face. For the first time, she saw not the savior, not the hero, but the man who carried a past far darker than he ever confessed. And in that moment, the desert felt colder than it had all night.